Our last session of the day. For those of you who've logged in remotely and were very patient with us, thank you. We had technical difficulties that I won't even try to describe. But here we are, and hopefully you can hear us just fine. Our last session of the day is from solving a problem to supplying a product. And I have with me for this conversation Jeannette Caines with Arts Inc. It was Jewelry Arts Institute for a long time, and I'm sorry, my muscle memory wants to say it wrong.
We all do, so don't feel bad.
I feel terrible, but it's Jewelry Arts Inc. Inc. Okay, and we have Ronda Coryell. I'm pointing up here to our television for our live audience so they can see where Ronda's joining us from New Mexico, and Ronda Coryell. Both Ronda and Jeannette have done something. Well, they started doing something that all jewelers do, which is when you're trying to solve a problem at the bench, sometimes you don't have the right tool, so you make one. But then they took it a step further, and now they supply a tool. And that's what we want to talk about today, because that's a pretty fun jeweler story. So, and I guess that's where I want to start with both of you, is that I'd like each of you to tell your tool story. So, you want to start, Jeannette, since I'm really confident your microphone works, and I'm going to work the courage up to get Ronda on here.
Yes, I feel it's going to work beautifully. Don't worry. So, yes, we make our own tools in the studio, but the whole problem with that is that you can't make them for everybody. And that's what it comes down to. I'm sure Ronda will say some version of the same. When you're in the studio and you have a problem, you fix it. You make a new tool, you make the right thing. But when you're teaching, the students don't have those tools. You don't have time to sit and hand make necessarily every tool. And then as a teacher, your biggest responsibility is to encourage people and not have roadblocks stand in their way. So if they're using a tool that isn't right for them, what are they going to do? They're immediately going to blame themselves. First thing, everyone's like, oh, I'm stink at this, I'm no good, I'm so slow, et cetera, et cetera.
Just what you don't want happening with a student.
Exactly right. And so that's the encapsulated version of why I started making tools for students too, because I didn't want them to get discouraged. I wanted them to have the right thing to make it easier, not harder.
So do you make many tools that you supply?
Well, I choose all the tools we supply, put it that way. And then when we truly can't get what we want, nowhere, then we make it ourselves. But that's the whole thing, is to try to get what's right for people, because there's a million tools out there, and it doesn't even mean that those tools are necessarily bad, but they're not right for what we do, for our students, for our techniques. So that's what it comes down to.
Okay, so your tool story starts with making sure your students are successful.
Yes.
Very cool. Okay, Ronda, I'm going to mic the computer now, and let's see if we can get Ronda's story out to all of you. Ronda, what's your tool story?
Okay, well, it is the same sort of thing, that there are certain tools.
Hold on 1 second. The miking isn't quite working for that.
Uh-oh.
We're trying. That's
Please
okay.
stand by.
Why is the mic not picking? Huh? It's coming out of this computer. Say something again, Ronda.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Is it coming through? No, we can hear you on the computer. It's just not coming through in the sound system here.
Okay.
It is. It's just really quiet. We can turn this mic way up on the mixer. Okay, because jewelers are used to being problem solvers, so we're just solving another problem, which you're going to pray that I don't solve with a hammer in a moment.
That's how we solve our problems.
Well, the hammer is ultimately satisfying, if not the fix. Do you know which mic number this is? Are we on 4 here? 3. 4. All the way here. Try turning that last set down. I'll talk later. Go down. Next one. Okay, now this mic's going to be really loud. Say
Well,
something again, Rhonda.
okay, can you hear me now?
Can you guys hear her a little bit?
Only a little bit, huh?
I'm afraid you're going to be yelling today, Rhonda.
Oh, well, I can get a little closer and see if I can talk louder. Did that help?
Coming through at all on the recording? A little bit. All right, go ahead. Tell your tool story, Rhonda.
Okay. Well, as Jeannette was even saying, that when we can't find the right tool, you you make it, and if you can, and making tools can be very easy too. Sometimes it's just altering a tool that's already there to make it what you want, and sometimes you don't even know what tool you want until you need it, and you think, if I just had something this shape, and then you can make it, and what's that?
You're hearing background noise from the exposition
Yeah.
now, and I'm still
Okay.
trying to get the best sound for you. And
Yeah. Well, we'll try to do what we can. Can you hear me now?
it comes in and out. Sometimes you're loud enough, and sometimes you're not. And I'm
Oh, dear.
not being very successful improving it on this end.
Well, we just might have to have Jeannette do all the talking for us. Oh,
Is it- Where else can I go for sound on this? I know you're coming through for our digital audience. It's the live audience that can't hear you. That's where we're running into trouble.
You still can't hear me?
Just talk as loud as you can.
Okay, that's it. My thing is turned all the way up, so I will just try to talk a little louder. But yes, a lot of times it's just, if you just had a tool a certain shape or a certain size, that it would make the job easier. So that's where you start to get into making tools. And so I travel with the tools again, as Jeannette was saying, so that my students will all also have the tools. And then it developed in, well, if they use it, they want to buy it. So it was a necessity to make tools. Not that it was my intention, but it's what has to happen is, and I've tried to have other people make some of these tools for me, but again, it's hard to get it to your specification. So, um, there's certain things like that as far as like even the physical tools. Now, the masking mud that I have is something that I developed mainly because I needed to solve a problem. And as Jeannette was even saying, it has to do with problem solving. And when there's an issue or a problem, how do you fix it? Well, sometimes it's a tool that you can make yourself. And uh, that's pretty much where mine came in. So, like I said, it's a very similar story to Jeanette's. Is kind of what we do.
You'll be pleased to know we did start getting your sound through the speakers here, Rhonda. So
Oh,
it's working. So I guess my next question for both of you is, what was the first tool that you just really had to make and supply yourself? What was this problem that you were solving, a specific one?
how about you, Jeannette?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, it was probably setting tools because I have relatively small hands and jewelry tools in general are made for large man's hands. And that's really sad for us. So we have to do all kinds of modification. And
Especially since most of the jewelers these days are women.
99% of my students are women, and yet everything is designed for men. Where it lies, but so there was a huge amount of modification, and even with the modification, I felt like these weren't really right. So we all ended up making our own tools for ourselves. Always. I mean, that's just normal. And kind of like Ronda was saying, it's not like you decide to go into the tool business. It's just inevitable because you need it, so then your students need it. And then, well, somebody's going to have to make it, either that or, you give it to the Keebler elves or something. Like, well, how are you going to make all those handmade tools and still teach and still sleep, eat, and all those other fun things? So that's really how it
That's so
goes.
high maintenance of you.
I know. Clearly, I'm drought famine resistant, so I do like to take care of myself that way.
So, Rhonda, what was the first tool you had to solve this problem for?
Well, I would say it was a type of a punch, like a chasing tool, something that created the exact shape that I wanted. Because I had bought some, but none of them were my shape. And it took me a while to realize that even if I bought one, that's not my shape, that's their shape. And I want this shape. Well, nobody makes my shape. So therefore, I had to make it. And sometimes some of the tools that I make, I find fun, but generally it's like it keeps me, as Jeanette was saying, it keeps you away from doing these other things you want to do, but you kind of, it's out of necessity that you end up doing these things. So, yeah, I'm sure it was a punch and or a hammer. Generally it was something that I adapted, probably more than made from scratch.
And now, you were saying something about needing Keebler elves. So do both of you hand make the tools that you're supplying?
I do.
Or, like, and how time consuming is that, and how do you do that?
I make mine. I keep that. I have a grinder in the studio, and I have a belt sander. I have certain files and things that I'll be using on those tools. I do have somebody that's helping me make my masking mud, but I do it one blender at a time because I want it to be consistent. And I've burned up 3 blenders doing it. Um, but no, I still make my own tools, and I just find, again, it's more of I want to make sure my students have what they need, and then it just kind of blossomed into more people wanted it, and I'm like, okay. Um, but yeah, it's hard to take the time to do it because it to me it takes time away from making jewelry or other things in making the tools, but I have no choice. It's the only way to get what I want. So like I said, I've tried to find people that could make them for me and have not been pleased with the results, so therefore I end up making them myself. How about you, Jeanette? Did you make yours?
I make some of my own, like the G glue. I actually whipped that up in a big cauldron in my kitchen, which was really
Uh-huh.
But I partner with Temple from All Crafts,
Right.
and he helps me to find people who will make the tools. Because as Ronda was saying, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely slow. Everyone will tell you, of course, we'll make exactly what you want, exactly the way you want it, and then no, they don't. So it's not nearly as easy as you would think. A lot of times it takes probably about 3 years from when I make my prototype to when it's actually ready. But for certain things I can do it myself, but I could not make all those setting tools myself. Like I couldn't do it, not possible.
Do you have any insight into why it's so hard for the manufacturing partner to make your tools to spec?
Well, jewelers were very particular, and we want it how we want it. Just like Ronda said, we want it how we want it, and that really sums it up. Because I'm not going to put something out there that I recommend to somebody that's lousy or doesn't do the job that I want it to do. And, to be a jeweler is to be a control freak. I mean, anyone who tells you different is lying. So that's why it's not easy.
Yeah.
Is it the same story for you, Rhonda?
Oh, pretty much. And that's, like I said, that if I could find somebody that would do them the same, I would get more into the tool sales. And this is where some of them I'll say, limited number available, because there's going to be a time I'm just done with making them. If I can't find somebody to make them for me, which again, we are control freaks. I want it my way. I want it this way. And they'll be close, but I could have done it my own. Yeah, I like to have the control.
So the kinds of compromises you would need to make to have a manufacturer make the tools that you've tried to have made, what kinds of compromises are those, and how would that have affected the way the tool worked?
I don't know that I've done any compromising.
If somebody were to make it for you, so for instance, you take a design prototype to a manufacturer, but they can't do it the way you want it, what kinds of compromises were needed in order to make it manufacturable?
That'd be you, Jeanette.
No.
No, I realize you said no, but what was it that wasn't working from the manufacturer that you were like, I can't have a manufacturer make this because we talk in jewelry manufacturing, we talk all the time about design for manufacturability, that sometimes what we can design and what can be manufactured in a mass production environment don't match. And so then we end up saying, well, how do we take this design and make it manufacturable? So what I hear you two saying is, the compromises that were necessary to make it manufacturable were compromises I wasn't willing to make, so I'm making it myself. I'm curious what those compromises would have been that you were like, it's worth more to me to make it myself. Like, how would that have affected the way the tool worked or how the tool was used?
For me, usually it's about hand finishing. No matter how something is made, how something is sanded and polished can make all the difference between usable tool and completely not usable tool. So usually that's where it really comes down to the prototypes and then me saying, well, the basic shape's okay, but the finishing isn't right. The finishing isn't right. The finishing isn't right.
The finishing on the tool itself, or what would the tool would do to the finishing?
No, what the finishing on the tool itself, because you can make a basic shape in steel or brass or anything, but how it's sanded and polished is really how the tool works. And small differences there are everything.
Okay, so you're saying the finishing of the tool would affect the tool's performance, and they couldn't get it.
That's everything in a tool's performance. I'm sure Ronda will say something pretty darn similar.
Well, that is pretty much it in a nutshell. Is that on certain things I tried to have them do it, and I think because the person trying to make the tool doesn't really understand how the tool is supposed to be used and made, that they kind of don't get it. You know, they can get close, but it's not what I want. So therefore, I'm not willing to make those compromises. So therefore, I only do the tools that I'm making myself. Yeah.
So how many tools do you guys hand make per year? Like, what kind of a production project is this?
Mine's not thousands. I mean, it's a few hundred. Yeah, probably. I would say it's a few hundred. I'm not gonna do thousands of them. I don't have that kind of time. I certainly don't want to do that. Well, the jars of mud, there are thousands and thousands of those. Yeah, but like the tools that are so critical on shaping and those things, I would say I only do a few hundred per year. How about you, Jeannette?
Actually, now, because unset a stone, I would hand make the unsetting tool. And now, at least I have my set, and it took easily 3 years or so of prototypes and prototypes. But now, I like how it came out, and they can use it just the way it is. So I'm making the last point where you're happy.
And then how much inventory do you have to buy of the tools to have them do a production run so you can then sell them to your students?
That's the is that everyone says they'll make exactly what you want, and then they don't, and then they also want you to order 8 billion of them. So honestly, if I weren't partnering with Tevel from Allcraft, a lot of this would be much less possible. I mean, Tevel really knows all the suppliers, and he knows how to negotiate and work it, because that's the whole thing. Everyone wants to have an enormous run of the same thing, and we don't want that. So.
Yeah, then you have to also go into distribution, and I get the impression you two really just want your tools for your students.
Yeah.
So tell me this, what tool would you make? First of all, of the tools that you've developed, which is the one that you think would do the greatest service to the jewelry industry if you only had a manufacturer that could manufacture it correctly?
For me, I'd say it's this half-round plier that I just cannot get anyone to make it the right finish, the right finish, the exact curve of everything all goes together to make it so critical that to me, that one tool, because I use it every day.
I've been working on a set of pliers for about four, maybe 5 years now, that I'm
Wow.
still holding out hope. I mean, for me, I just try to just keep going back to it, because I know that I cannot and will not make handmade pliers for production. I mean, there are certain lines in the sand that I'm not going to cross. So generally, we just keep going back to the table and keep doing more prototypes, and so that hopefully, eventually, because eventually, usually, you can get it, but you just have to be so stubborn. Like, no, it's not right. No, it's not right. No, it's not right. No, it's not right.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. Hopefully nicely, and then hopefully they don't just utterly get sick of you. But on the other hand, if they're not going to make it the way you want it, there's no point to it. So
So for Ronda first, what is it? I mean, man, I could picture a good 15, 20 manufacturers of half-round pliers. I've probably handled more than half of them. What is it about your half-round plier what's it going to do that people aren't able to do right now because there's not a plier that does it?
Well, for me, especially for a tiny, very small and very narrow with the right curve to it. A lot of half-round pliers are much too tall and rounded. I want something more curved like this, that is like the arc of a circle, and very tiny at the end, like 1 millimeter at the end to come to, because I need it for little small. I do a lot of wire work with curly cues and those sort of shapes, and if anything that's too fat can't fit in there, therefore that's why for me it's something that's small enough that can do the job I need.
And for you, Jeannette?
that's the dream. Pliers that actually end at 1 millimeter, and yet they're strong and don't bend
Yes.
easily. I mean, most of the time, it's that everything is made too big. Like hammers are made for silversmithing, like coffee pots, which is amazing, but I don't make coffee pots, I make jewelry. So like, I want little hammers, I want little pliers, I want small tools that make jewelry the scale that we actually make it. And so many of them are just made, huge, which, like I said, is fine for some things. But I mean, literally, the pliers that end at 1 millimeter, that's like the holy grail. We're always like, but can the ends be really small and actually round, not just roundish, but round.
Yes.
Getting that level of precision is like very difficult.
Well, I would imagine those ends are fragile when they're that small, so they don't have the strength. Same problem with small hammers, right? They can't carry enough weight.
The small hammers, honestly, if you don't try to make a coffee pot with it, you're fine. You know what I mean? The pliers are more fragile, yes, but if you're using them on the kind of things that we use them for, they're fine. I mean, sometimes you might get a little carried away and bend them, but still, I'd rather have the pliers that work and replace them every now and then because they bend, that are actually the right size. I mean, I just laughed when Ronda said 1 millimeter at the end, and we're like, oh, 1 millimeter, that's a lot. It's like, that's the dream. And it's stuff like that, because most tools are made just sort of for the average size hand, the average size project. And when you do highly detailed work like we do, and I know like Ronda does, I've seen her work, and it's amazing and hyper detailed and crazy, like the kind of stuff we do, you want the tools that can actually pull that off. They need to be fine tools with a fine finish, that have ends that are round.
Now, we were talking a lot about the fact that we want the small tools, not just because you're going into very small spaces, but also because the preponderance of women that have been entering the jewelry industry, and I'm pretty sure Alan Revere told me this, it's got to be 12 years ago now, that his classes were shifted over almost entirely to women by then. So this isn't a new phenomenon. But given how many women are jewelers with much smaller hands on average than men, do you think your manufacturers would be motivated to try a little harder to get your specs right if they had a sense of how many people would buy such a tool, for instance? Or is it really that they're just having a hard time producing what it is you want them to produce?
What do you think?
Jeanette's
What was
asking
that?
What do you think, Rhonda? I don't know.
Now, and the question, I guess I didn't understand the question.
Do you think your manufacturing, the people you've talked to would be more motivated if they had a sense of the volume of people that could be served by these tools?
Well, again, like Jeanette said, I think they're going to the average. And what is the average? Like, okay, maybe some of the tools that we are making, Jeanette and I, are a little more selective for not necessarily the average jeweler out there making these kind of things. A lot of what we're doing is very detailed, very tiny, very small. And well, what is the market? Well, maybe the market is more of the average. And I would say most of our students are not average students. Wouldn't you say that, Jeanette?
All right, next question.
So,
What tool are you working on now? What's your latest holy grail?
I don't have anything new in the works for me. I'm just trying to keep up with what I've got because I'm just working on so many other things. I've even cut back on traveling because I want to have a life other than just
Because
always.
you're making hundreds of tools a year by hand.
Yeah,
Who has time to
you know,
travel when you're making hundreds of tools?
sometimes I have to make myself get in there and go make tools. It's like, oh man, it's such a gorgeous day. Well, I mean, it's what I do and I have no choice. But it's not something that I'm doing it when my students need it more than anything. And other than that, it's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in getting into massive tool sales. I just like kind of doing what I'm doing, and I enjoy what I'm doing. And so I don't have anything new in store for like new tools.
What about you?
We're all such tool junkies here. I mean, you figure, would you even come to MJSA if you didn't want to fondle all the tools? I mean, I've been coming to the show since I can't even remember, when I was just a youth, to look at all the tools and look at the stones and everything. But I mean, I have a huge long list. I have these textured setting punches that are about $2.5 in, and I'm sure who knows how much longer that'll be. I've been working on these custom dies to reproduce ancient forms. I've been on that for the last couple of years. That's made me completely insane and foaming at the mouth because I love it so much. And so I always have a ton of things on my list. But I've learned, just like everything with jewelry making, like nothing is fast. So you just work on it. And eventually, if you keep working on it, it'll happen.
So neither of you are particularly motivated to open up a machine shop?
No.
I love a machine shop, but I don't. But I want
I'd love
other people
to.
to help me
Yeah,
operate it.
but no, not so much.
So many of the things you end up doing, like when you teach, are not because you decide ahead of time, oh, well, a really good thing to do would be to start making tools or whatever. It's just you do these things because it becomes incredibly obvious that it has to be done. And if you don't do
Necessity.
it, no one's going to do it. And so you do it. So I mean, I don't think I ever planned almost anything that I've done. It just became very clear that I needed to do it. And then I did it.
Yep, out of necessity.
All right. Well, despite all of our technical challenges, getting Rhonda's voice out into our audience, I think you guys managed to sort of hear her in the live audience, right? And I know for a fact our digital audience was able to hear her. I want to thank everyone for being patient with us while we got that problem semi-solved. And I'd like to thank Ronda and Jeannette for being here and talking about their from jeweler to tool supplier to students, we should qualify.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, what if somebody calls you and says, I want those tools you make for your students? Do you sell them?
Oh,
All right, I do. Plug. I have it on my tool site, jewelryarttools.com.
What about you, Rhonda? Do you sell the tools if somebody calls you for them, or are they just for your students?
oops.
Can you hear me, Ronda?
I'm not hearing anything. It's like, you still there?
Can you hear us? Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us at this point?
It says,
Aye.
oops, streaming is having connection issues.
It looks like Ronda's having connection issues on her end, and she can no longer hear us, so we're going to end this session the way we began it. Is there a question from the audience? Can you like yell a little louder? So the question was, from the point at which they have a prototype, where do they go next for that?
Well, I go to Tevel at Allcraft because he knows everyone, and he helps me find the right manufacturer, because that's every different company has really their strong suit, you know, and some companies are also much more flexible and willing to work with you. So it really helps to get the advice of someone who knows the different companies and knows what it's like, because it kind of has always seemed like they always say yes, like, oh, of course we can do that. How many do you want? But then that's not always how it pans out. So it takes time to find the right partner.
So the question was, are you concerned with copyright or with the manufacturer potentially stealing an idea? And do these jewelers just get a non-disclosure sign?
I do recommend a non-disclosure form, but the main thing is to try to work with people that have a track record of trust, because the jewelry business is incredibly old-fashioned. Actually, I like that about it, because everything is on your reputation. So I think a contract actually doesn't protect you nearly as much as the reputation of the person that you're working with. So I tend to take that view, although NDAs, of course, I would recommend that. It's more about a company that has a track record of being trustworthy.
Ronda, do you have something to add to that?
Oh, I totally agree with that, and Tevel would be the one I would go to. One of the reasons, because he's always, he likes to support the jewelers, the studio jewelers, and he's always, do you have any tools you need made? Or, you know, he's always open to ideas. And that's the biggest part, is he knows everybody. So he can help put it together, because it's hard enough even when you have somebody to help you like that, that already is in that part of the business, in tool making. So yeah, I totally would say Tevel, number one.
The other thing to keep in mind is, unless you're inventing a tool that does something extraordinarily differently than other tools do, it's almost impossible to get intellectual property protection for it. So you'd have to actually be doing something different enough in application that you could get it protected. So it really does come down to trust, because a contract's worthless with somebody who's not going to be trustworthy in the first place.
Yeah.
Someone always told me that if you trust someone, you don't need a contract. And if you don't trust them, a contract isn't going to protect you. And you really can't argue with that wisdom.
But that doesn't mean don't get a contract.
That is correct.
It just means that it's still most valuable if you trust the partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I think with that, we're going to wrap it for this session. Again, Ronda, thank you so much for joining us from New Mexico. Apologies for the technical challenges. You did manage to come through loud and clear on the transmission, so, you know, your patience paid off. And thank you, Jeannette, very much for joining us here at MJSA Expo at the Javits in New York.
Thank you.
And now
Thanks
for
for
our
having me.
Oh, I'll put the mic back. Say it again, Rhonda.
Thanks. I was saying thanks for having me.
Always fun to hang out with you, even if it has to be digitally. All right, so we will be back with Live from MJSA Expo tomorrow. We will have 4 more sessions tomorrow. There's 1 more session on Tuesday. And if you're in the region, get to the Javits and see all these exhibitors here that are providing everything you need to support your jewelry business. And with that, we're going to wrap it for our first day of live from MJSA Expo and say have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.